Black Waitress defended a billionaire CEO from police. Next day, his power shocked her diner. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Imagine a lavish restaurant in downtown Chicago, the kind of place where billionaires dine and the air smells of gourmet delicacies. Tonight, the opulent setting was filled with the usual crowd, tech moguls, investors, and celebrities, each one clad in the finest suits and evening gowns. But at the center of it all stood Naomi Carter, a waitress who had been working at this upscale spot for years. Naomi was used to the glances, the quick dismissals, and the fact that most of the wealthy patrons barely noticed she was there. But tonight, everything was different. She had seen her fair share of rudeness. But this time, the situation was more than just uncomfortable. It was dangerous. It all started when a billionaire CEO, Richard Kessler, entered the restaurant with his entourage. Kessler, a tech mogul with a reputation for being ruthless, had been the center of attention all evening. He was known for his sharp business deals, his cold demeanor, and his ability to crush anyone who got in his way. Naomi had seen him around before, but tonight, his arrogance was on full display. He made his way to a private dining room at the back, but just as he was about to sit down, chaos erupted. A group of police officers stormed into the restaurant. Naomi couldn't hear everything, but she saw the way the officers approached Kessler, demanding he leave the premises. They accused him of being involved in a scandal that had just broken in the news, a scandal involving his company's illegal activities. The room fell silent. Naomi watched as Kessler tried to assert his dominance, but the officers were having none of it. They began to drag him toward the door, and that's when Naomi's instincts kicked in. She knew she had to do something. Naomi didn't hesitate. She walked right up to the officers, standing tall despite the fear that was bubbling inside her. "Let him go," she said, her voice steady but firm. The officers turned to her, clearly annoyed. "Mind your business, lady," one of them barked. But Naomi didn't back down. "This isn't right," she insisted. "He's not going anywhere without proper cause." The tension in the room was thick. The rich patrons, who had previously been ignoring Naomi, were now watching, unsure of what to do. But Naomi stood her ground. The officers, realizing they were making a scene in front of so many influential people, hesitated. It was just long enough for Naomi to act. With one swift move, she turned to Kessler and whispered, "Get up, now. Leave before they make this worse." Kessler, stunned by her bravery, looked her in the eye. For a moment, it seemed like he might argue, but then something changed in his expression. Perhaps it was the determination in Naomi's eyes, or maybe the realization that he was in a losing battle. He stood up slowly and walked out of the restaurant, the officers trailing behind him. As the door closed behind him, the room erupted in whispers. Naomi's heart was pounding in her chest, but she kept her composure. She had done what no one else would, standing up to a powerful man who had expected the world to bow to him. But little did she know, this wasn't the end of the story. What happened next would change her life forever. The next day, Naomi Carter arrived at work with a sense of unease she couldn't shake. After the chaotic scene the night before, she half expected something to happen. She had done the right thing by standing up for Richard Kessler, but now she wondered if it would backfire. The restaurant, usually buzzing with energy, seemed to have an air of tension that morning. The staff were quieter, exchanging nervous glances, and Naomi couldn't help but feel the weight of the previous night's events hanging in the air. She had expected things to go back to normal, or at least, to be forgotten by the time the sun rose. But it seemed like something was different. As she walked through the restaurant to clock in, she noticed that the usual chatter was replaced with an unusual hush. Heads turned as she passed, some guests staring at her as if she were a celebrity, others with an expression of curiosity. Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She grabbed her apron and began her shift, trying to focus on the tasks at hand. But it wasn't long before she noticed that things were far from ordinary. The usual rush of customers seemed quieter, more subdued. Then, at noon, her manager approached her with a nervous look on his face. "Naomi, we need to talk." he said, pulling her aside. There's someone here to see you. Naomi's heart skipped a beat. Who? She asked, a knot forming in her stomach. You'll see, he said, giving her a look that made her feel uneasy. She followed him to the front of the restaurant, where she was met with a figure she hadn't expected. Richard Kessler, the billionaire CEO she had stood up for the night before. He stood at the entrance, flanked by two men in suits, his presence commanding the room. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. He looked different, calmer, but there was something about him that radiated power. Naomi, he said, his voice deep and measured, can we talk? Naomi nodded, still processing what was happening. As they walked toward a quiet corner of the restaurant, Naomi tried to steady her nerves. The last time she had seen him, he had been dragged out by the police, humiliated in front of everyone. Now, here he was, standing tall, looking every bit the powerful man he was. I owe you an apology, Richard began, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that caught her off guard. What you did last night. You didn't have to step in, but you did. I didn't expect that. No one has ever stood up for me like that, especially not someone like you. Naomi blinked, surprised by his words. She had never thought about it as doing him a favor. She had only acted on instinct, knowing that what was happening wasn't right. I did what anyone would do, she said, her voice steady, though she could feel the weight of the moment. I didn't want to see anyone treated like that. Richard nodded slowly. But that's the problem, isn't it? He said. People like me, people in my position, we don't usually have anyone stand up for us, let alone someone in your position. Naomi was taken aback. You're a billionaire CEO. You have power. You don't need anyone to defend you, she said. Richard smiled faintly. I may have power, but sometimes that power doesn't protect you from everything. Last night, I was humiliated. But you made a difference. And I want to repay you. Naomi shook her head. I don't need anything from you, she said quickly. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Richard's expression softened. I know, but I don't forget moments like this. You showed me something last night that few people ever have the guts to do, and I want to make sure you're taken care of. Naomi was confused. What was he talking about? She had just done her job, stood up when things went wrong. She wasn't looking for a reward. I don't need charity, she said, her voice firm. I just do my job. Richard raised an eyebrow. This isn't charity. I'm offering you something you can't get by just working hard. I'm offering you a chance. Naomi frowned, unsure of what he meant. A chance for what? She asked. Richard took a deep breath, his gaze steady. A chance for a new life. A chance to leave all of this behind. Naomi felt her heart race. Was he offering her something she didn't deserve? Or was this something she couldn't refuse? I can offer you a position in my company. Something where you can use your skills, your intelligence, your potential. Naomi stared at him, her mind racing. This was happening so fast. Just yesterday, she had been a waitress, invisible to the world around her. Now, she was standing in front of a billionaire who was offering her a chance to change her life. But was it really a chance, or just another way to pull her into a system that had always left her behind? Why me? She asked, still unsure of his motives. Richard's eyes darkened slightly. Because you're different. You showed me what it means to have real power, and I want to give you a chance to use it. Naomi stood there, processing everything he had said. She had never expected this. She had never thought that standing up for someone would lead to something like this. But now, as she stood facing Richard Kessler, she realized that everything had changed. The power she had seen in him was now in her hands. The next move was hers to make. The following day, Naomi walked into the restaurant, her thoughts still heavy with what had transpired the previous evening. Richard Kessler had left her with a proposition, an offer that felt too surreal to process. A position in his company? A chance to change her life? She had never thought of herself as someone who would be given such opportunities. She had always worked hard just to survive, never expecting the world to hand her anything. But here she was, in a position she had never imagined, facing a decision that could alter the course of her future. The shift started like any other. She moved quickly, refilling glasses, serving food, and making sure the guests were happy. But there was an underlying tension in the air. Naomi felt like everyone was watching her, waiting for her to crack, to break. Her mind kept drifting back to Richard's words. She didn't want to seem ungrateful, but the offer felt too good to be true. Could she trust him? Was this just another way for a billionaire to play with her life? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it, something she wasn't seeing. She was lost in thought when she noticed Richard walking in. His presence was undeniable. His eyes scanned the room, landing on her with a look of recognition. Naomi felt a chill run down her spine as she walked toward him. This time, he wasn't surrounded by his entourage. He stood alone, his posture relaxed, but there was an air of control that surrounded him. "Naomi," he said, his voice warm but still carrying the weight of authority. "How's your shift going?" Naomi hesitated for a moment before responding. "It's going fine." She didn't know what else to say. The truth was, her mind was in a whirlwind. Richard smiled faintly. "I know you're probably thinking about my offer, and I don't want you to feel rushed. Take your time." Naomi nodded, trying to process his words. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet. Richard's gaze softened. "I understand if you need some space, but just know that the offer still stands. I know what it's like to be underestimated, to be looked down on because of where you come from. That's why I want to help you." Naomi met his eyes, trying to read the sincerity behind his words. It was hard to trust someone like him, someone who had everything. But then she thought about her own struggles, the years spent working 2 jobs just to keep a roof over her head and food on the table. She thought about the people who had dismissed her, ignored her, told her she wasn't good enough. Richard wasn't like them. Or at least, that's what he was telling her. "I don't know if I'm ready for something like this," Naomi said, her voice wavering slightly. Richard placed a hand on the table, his expression serious. "Naomi, no one ever is. But the opportunity is there, and it's yours for the taking." Naomi exhaled slowly, trying to make sense of it all. She wanted to say yes, but something held her back. She had seen the way power worked, the way people with money could control everything around them. What if Richard was using her for something else? What if this wasn't really about helping her at all? "I'll think about it," she said finally, not wanting to make a decision in the heat of the moment. Richard gave her a small nod. "Take all the time you need. But remember, the world doesn't wait for anyone." With that, he turned and walked toward the exit, leaving Naomi standing there, lost in thought. As the evening wore on, Naomi's thoughts remained consumed by Richard's offer. She couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen, something that would change everything. She had never been one to shy away from hard work, but this was different. This wasn't just another job. This was a chance to step into a world she had never dreamed of, a world of power, influence, and wealth. But with that came risks. Naomi knew better than anyone how easily the powerful could manipulate those beneath them. She had seen it time and time again. As she cleared the last table and prepared to leave for the night, Naomi's mind was made up. She wasn't going to let fear stop her from taking this opportunity. But she wasn't going to walk into it blindly either. If she was going to work with someone like Richard, she needed to keep her guard up. She had learned the hard way that trust had to be earned. Naomi wasn't ready to give that trust away just yet. The next few days were a blur for Naomi. The weight of Richard's offer lingered in her mind, gnawing at her as she went through her daily routine. She had always been the kind of person to take things one step at a time, but this was different. This was a crossroads, and the decision ahead felt monumental. Her life had always been about survival, getting by, making ends meet. But now, with the world seemingly opening up in front of her, Naomi didn't know what to do with the opportunity that had been handed to her. On the 3rd day after their conversation, Naomi stood in front of the restaurant's entrance, staring at the door. Her shift had just ended, and she was exhausted, physically and mentally. But as her shift ended, Naomi found herself faced with the same question once more. Should she go to Richard's office? The invitation had been clear, and she had been avoiding it, hoping the decision would make itself. But now, she realized that she couldn't keep putting it off. She had to face this head-on. Taking a deep breath, Naomi walked toward the office building. She had been to this part of town before, but never for anything like this. The high-rise was sleek and polished, towering over the city like a fortress of wealth. She felt a twinge of anxiety as she walked through the revolving doors, feeling out of place in her simple uniform. The receptionist smiled politely at her. "How may I help you?" she asked. Naomi felt a wave of nerves. She wasn't used to this kind of treatment. The receptionist, likely accustomed to seeing CEOs and powerful figures, seemed to barely register Naomi's presence. "I have an appointment with Mr. Kessler," Naomi said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Of course," the receptionist replied, quickly tapping something into her computer. He's expecting you. Please, take the elevator to the top floor. Naomi nodded, feeling a strange mix of excitement and dread. As the elevator ascended, her mind raced with questions. Was this really the right move? Could she trust Richard? Or was she simply being used in some kind of corporate game that she didn't understand? The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Naomi stepped out into a grand, sleek office lobby. It was a far cry from the warm, bustling atmosphere of the restaurant she had worked in for so long. Everything here was polished, cold, almost sterile in its perfection. Naomi was ushered down a hallway and into a large office, where Richard was waiting. He stood when she entered, a smile spreading across his face. "Naomi, welcome," he said, his voice warm. "Please, have a seat." She sat down cautiously, noticing the contrast between their worlds. Richard was in a sharp, tailored suit, his presence commanding, while Naomi felt as though she had stepped into a world that wasn't hers. The stark difference between them hit her harder than she expected. "I'm glad you decided to come," Richard said, his gaze intense but not unkind. "I know this is a big decision, but I'm not offering you this out of charity. I believe you have potential, real potential that's been overlooked for too long." Naomi swallowed, unsure of what to say. She had thought she would come in here, make the decision, and walk out with an answer. But now, sitting across from Richard, it felt like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. She had spent her life working hard, but could she trust him? Was this her chance to break free from the cycle of struggle, or was she just walking into another trap? "I'm not looking for a handout," Naomi finally said, her voice firm. "I just want a chance to prove myself, to show that I can do more than just serve people food. I want something that actually means something." Richard nodded slowly. "And that's exactly what I'm offering you," he said. "A chance to be more than just the waitress in the back of the room. This could be your opportunity to step into a role that lets you use your talents, your mind, your vision. You've shown me that you're capable of more than you even realize." Naomi felt a flicker of hope in her chest. This was more than just a job offer. It was an opportunity to finally be seen, to be recognized for her intelligence and hard work. But there was still a part of her that hesitated. She had been let down before, and the fear of getting hurt again lingered in the back of her mind. Richard seemed to sense her hesitation. "I understand your doubts, but this isn't just about money or power. It's about something bigger. I'm offering you a chance to change the narrative of your life. But it's up to you to take that step." Naomi sat there, processing his words. The offer felt real, more real than anything she had ever been given. But the question still remained. Was she ready to take that leap? Was she ready to trust him? Or was this just another way for the powerful to control her? The silence hung heavy in the room. Richard didn't push her, but his gaze remained steady, waiting for her response. Naomi took a deep breath. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she knew that this was a moment she couldn't walk away from. "I'll take the chance," she said quietly, her voice firm. "But I won't forget where I came from, and I won't let anyone forget what it took to get here." Richard's smile widened, and Naomi could see the approval in his eyes. He had given her the opportunity, but now, it was her turn to prove that she was worth it. Naomi had made her choice. The real test was just beginning. The days following Naomi's decision were a blur of anticipation and nerves. She had agreed to take the chance Richard had offered, but the uncertainty of what that meant weighed heavily on her. The reality of the opportunity, an entirely new life, a different world, was a lot to process. But Naomi knew she couldn't turn back now. She had always been someone who faced challenges head-on, and this was no different. As the week passed, Naomi found herself back in the world she knew best, the restaurant. But this time, there was something different. Richard had arranged for her to begin working with his team at the company, to shadow some of the higher-ups, and to get a feel for the world she was about to enter. It wasn't a traditional job offer. It wasn't about sitting in an office from 9 to 5. This was more of a mentorship, a chance to learn and prove herself before fully stepping into a new role. Naomi had always been resourceful, and she threw herself into the work, trying to soak up as much knowledge as she could. It was intimidating, to say the least. She was surrounded by people who had been in the corporate world for years, people who were used to making decisions that affected millions. Yet, every time she walked into the office, she could feel Richard's presence behind her. He had a way of making her feel seen, but also watched. Not in a bad way, but in a way that made her feel like her every move was being evaluated. The first week was tough. Naomi felt out of place at times, walking the fine line between fitting in and staying true to herself. She found herself questioning every decision, every conversation, wondering if she was doing enough to earn Richard's trust. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings, Naomi sat in the quiet of the office, alone with her thoughts. The city lights of New York glimmered outside the windows, but all she could focus on was the pressure she felt building up. Was she ready for this? Could she really make it in this world? Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from Richard. "I see what you're doing, Naomi. Keep it up. You're on the right track." Naomi stared at the message, feeling a small spark of encouragement. Richard wasn't just offering her a position. He was giving her the chance to prove herself in a world that didn't always recognize talent unless it came with a suit and tie. But now, as she stood in the glow of her own uncertainty, she realized that the real challenge wasn't just about fitting into Richard's world. It was about carving out a space for herself within it. The next day, Naomi was invited to a meeting with some of the senior executives, a rare opportunity for someone in her position. She knew it was her chance to make an impression. The room was large, the walls lined with sleek art and framed achievements. Naomi took a deep breath as she stepped inside. Richard was already there, standing at the head of the table, greeting everyone with his usual charm. The executives were a mix of sharp minds and hardened professionals, all dressed in suits that spoke of years of success. Naomi felt small, but she wasn't going to let that stop her. As the meeting went on, Naomi kept quiet at first, watching and listening. She absorbed every word, noting the way the conversation flowed and the decisions were made. There was a rhythm to it, a rhythm Naomi could feel in her bones. She wasn't just here to observe. She was here to contribute. Finally, the opportunity came. One of the executives asked a question about a potential strategy that Richard's company was pursuing. Naomi felt the moment, and before she could second-guess herself, she spoke up. "What if we considered expanding into smaller markets first? Instead of going after the big fish, we could secure a loyal base, test the waters before going national." The room fell silent for a moment. Naomi's heart raced, but she held her ground. Richard's eyes flickered with interest. "That's an interesting idea," he said, nodding thoughtfully. "What else do you think?" Naomi spoke, offering a few more thoughts on the subject. By the end of the meeting, she could tell that her ideas had been heard. Richard gave her an approving glance, and the executives exchanged looks that Naomi couldn't quite read. She wasn't sure if it was a good or bad sign, but she knew one thing for sure. She had spoken up. She wasn't just standing on the sidelines anymore. As the meeting wrapped up, Richard pulled Naomi aside. "You did well today," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I'm impressed with how you're thinking." Naomi felt a surge of relief, but also something deeper, a sense of purpose. She had stepped into this new world with nothing but determination and an idea. And now, for the first time in a long time, Naomi felt like she belonged. It wasn't just about the job or the paycheck. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of more than anyone had ever given her credit for. As Naomi walked out of the building that evening, the city around her seemed a little less intimidating. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was someone who had earned her place, and for the first time, she believed she could make it in this world. But as she left the building, she knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but Naomi had found the courage to walk it, and she wasn't turning back. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind for Naomi. She was adjusting to her new role within Richard Kessler's company, and while things were moving faster than she had ever expected, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being tested. Every conversation, every meeting felt like a challenge, but Naomi was determined to rise to the occasion. Richard had become more than just her boss. He had become her mentor, but in many ways, their relationship still felt like a balancing act. She respected him for his drive and his vision, but there were moments when she wondered about his true motivations. He had been nothing but supportive of her so far, but was this all part of a bigger plan? Naomi often found herself sitting alone in the office late at night, reviewing notes, double-checking her work, and wondering if she was truly ready for what was ahead. The stakes felt higher now. This wasn't just about doing a good job anymore. It was about proving that she belonged in a world that had never made room for someone like her. She was starting to see more of the people who ran this world, other executives, investors, and powerful figures. Some were kind, others were cold, and most seemed to operate with an air of arrogance, as if they had earned the right to look down on everyone else. But Naomi had seen this before. She had seen the way people treated servers, the way they treated those who were invisible to them. Now, she was on the other side of it, but she refused to forget where she came from. That morning, Naomi was called into a meeting with Richard and a few other senior executives. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew it was important. As she walked into the sleek conference room, Richard was already seated at the head of the table, his eyes scanning through a set of documents. Naomi took a seat across from him, feeling the usual nerves creep up. The others in the room were silent, their attention on the papers in front of them. "Naomi," Richard said, breaking the silence. "I've been reviewing your progress, and I have to say, I'm impressed with how quickly you've adapted." Naomi felt a rush of pride, but she kept her expression neutral, not wanting to seem too eager. "Thank you, Richard," she said, keeping her tone even. "I've been doing my best." Richard gave her a small nod. "You've done more than that. You've shown initiative, and that's something I value in this company." He paused, as if considering his next words carefully. "I've been thinking about your future. Here, I want to offer you a more permanent role, one that will give you more influence, more responsibility. This is your chance to make a real impact." Naomi's heart raced as the words sank in. A permanent role? More responsibility? She had been working so hard just to keep up, and now Richard was offering her a chance to step into something bigger. She hadn't expected this kind of opportunity, and it both excited and terrified her. "What kind of role are we talking about?" Naomi asked, her voice steady despite the excitement building inside her. Richard leaned back in his chair, his gaze piercing as he spoke. "I want you to oversee one of our upcoming projects. It's a high-profile deal that could change the trajectory of this company. I believe you have the skills and the vision to handle it." Naomi was stunned. She had always dreamed of being in a position where her ideas could have an impact, but she hadn't expected it to come so soon. "I'm honored by the offer," she said, her voice quieter now, processing the magnitude of what was being presented to her. "But are you sure I'm ready for something like this? I've only been here for a short time." Richard smiled, a hint of approval in his eyes. "That's exactly why I'm offering it to you. You've already proven that you can handle more than anyone expected. This is your chance to show everyone what you're capable of." The other executives around the table nodded in agreement, some with begrudging respect, others with curiosity. Naomi had made an impression, and now, she had to prove that she could rise to the occasion. But the pressure was immense. She had never been in a position like this before. It was one thing to be part of the team, but it was another to be the one calling the shots. Naomi felt a wave of self-doubt wash over her. Could she really do this? Could she handle the weight of the responsibility that came with this role? But then, she remembered the girl who had stood up to the police for a billionaire CEO. She remembered the courage she had shown, even when she wasn't sure of herself. Maybe this was the same thing. Maybe, once again, it was about doing the right thing, even when it was scary. Naomi took a deep breath and looked Richard in the eye. "I accept," she said, her voice firm and clear. "I'll take the role." Richard's smile widened, and Naomi could see the approval in his eyes. He had placed his trust in her, and now, it was her turn to prove that she was worthy of it. As she left the meeting that day, Naomi felt the weight of her decision. This was no longer just about proving herself to Richard. It was about proving to herself that she could rise to the challenge and make a difference. The road ahead would be difficult, but Naomi was ready. She was no longer just a waitress. She was someone with a vision, and now, she had the chance to make that vision a reality. Naomi woke up the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose. The decision she had made the day before had set the stage for something bigger than she had ever imagined. The reality of her new role was sinking in, and with it came a wave of responsibility. As she prepared for the day, Naomi felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She was no longer just a part of the team. Now, she was leading a project that could make or break the company. The weight of that responsibility was heavy, but Naomi knew that she couldn't let the fear of failure hold her back. She had worked too hard to get here. She had already faced so many challenges in her life. And this was her chance to finally prove that she was more than just someone who served food at a restaurant. As Naomi walked into the office, she was met with the usual hum of activity. But today felt different. People were talking, discussing the project she was now in charge of. She could hear snippets of conversation about numbers, timelines, and strategies. It was all so overwhelming. But at the same time, it was thrilling. For the first time, she wasn't on the outside looking in. She was at the center of it all. Richard had set her up with a team to help execute the project. They were a group of sharp, experienced professionals who had worked on high-profile deals before. Naomi felt the weight of their eyes on her as she stepped into the conference room, but she held her ground. She had been in rooms like this before. Only back then, she had been invisible. Now, she was here to make her mark. The meeting began, and Naomi immediately took charge, outlining the goals and the steps they would take to make the project a success. She listened intently as her team spoke, asking questions, offering suggestions, and bouncing ideas off one another. Naomi was learning, quickly realizing how much she didn't know, but also how much she could bring to the table. Her ideas, though new to the corporate world, were met with interest, and for the first time, she felt like her voice mattered. As the meeting continued, Naomi saw the way the team began to warm up to her. They respected her for taking charge, for showing that she was capable. There were moments of doubt, of course, when she felt like she was out of her depth, but she pushed those thoughts aside. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to waste it. By the end of the day, the plan was in place, and Naomi felt a sense of accomplishment. She had done it. She had led her team through a critical meeting, and they were all on the same page. As the team dispersed, Richard walked over to her with a look of approval in his eyes. "You did well today," he said, his voice calm but firm. Naomi smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "Thank you. It was a lot, but I think we're on the right track." Richard nodded. "I knew you had it in you. You're more than just a waitress, Naomi. You're a leader." The words hit her harder than she expected. Naomi had always believed that her worth was tied to her work ethic, her ability to push through. But Richard's words were different. They weren't about what she did. They were about who she was. Naomi had always struggled with the idea of being seen as more than just what she did for a living. But now, for the first time, she was starting to believe that she could be more. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and late nights. Naomi threw herself into the project with everything she had, determined to prove herself. Her team responded well to her leadership, and despite the occasional challenge, they made steady progress. But as the project began to take shape, Naomi started to feel the pressure mounting. There were higher stakes now. The project wasn't just a success for the company. It was a reflection of her. The weight of that realization was heavy, and there were moments when she wondered if she was in over her head. But then, every time she thought about giving up, she remembered where she came from. She remembered the times when people had doubted her, when she had been overlooked and dismissed. This project, this role, was her chance to show the world what she was capable of. She couldn't walk away from it now. As the weeks went on, Naomi found herself not just managing the project, but also taking on more responsibility within the company. She was becoming a key player, someone people relied on. It was exhilarating, but also terrifying. She knew that one misstep could cost her everything. But the more she learned, the more confident she became in her ability to navigate the challenges that came her way. Richard, always a step ahead, continued to guide her, but he gave her the space she needed to grow. One evening, after a particularly long day, Naomi sat in her office, staring out at the city skyline. She couldn't believe how far she had come. Just a few months ago, she had been serving food at a restaurant, invisible to the world around her. Now, she was in charge of a major project that could shape the future of the company. Naomi leaned back in her chair, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over her. This was just the beginning. There was so much more to do, so many more challenges to face. But for the first time in her life, she felt like she was on the right path. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. The weeks that followed felt like a blur for Naomi. The project she was leading was moving forward, and the momentum was picking up. But with that momentum came pressure to deliver, to prove that she was capable of handling the weight of responsibility. The stakes were higher than ever, and Naomi was no longer just the waitress who had stood up for a billionaire. She was now a key player in a high-stakes game, and everyone was watching. Richard Kessler had given her a chance, but he had also set her up for a test. The project was reaching its critical phase, and Naomi found herself facing difficult decisions. Decisions that would determine the success or failure of the entire venture. As she worked late one night, reviewing contracts and strategizing with her team, she felt the weight of the decision she had to make. There was a new opportunity on the horizon, one that could take the company to the next level. But it came with risks that could jeopardize everything they had worked for. Naomi had to decide whether to take that leap of faith or play it safe. Her team was counting on her, Richard was counting on her, and now, for the first time, Naomi was truly aware of just how much was on her shoulders. She was no longer just working to survive. She was leading a team that could change the future. The pressure was intense, but Naomi was determined to rise to the occasion. She knew what it was like to be underestimated, to be pushed aside, to be told she wasn't good enough. This time, she wasn't going to let fear hold her back. She would make the decision that was right for the project, no matter how difficult it was. The next morning, she called a meeting with her team. They gathered in the conference room, their faces filled with anticipation. Naomi stood at the head of the table, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew this was the moment where she would have to make the call that could either push them forward or send them backward. "We've come a long way," Naomi began, her voice steady. "And we're at a crossroads. There's a new opportunity in front of us, but it's not without risk. We could choose to play it safe, but I don't think that's what we're here for. We're here to make a difference." The room was silent, all eyes on Naomi. She could feel the weight of their expectations. "I think we should go for it," Naomi continued. "We have the skills, the vision, and the drive to take this to the next level. But it's going to take all of us working together, all of us pushing forward with everything we have. Are you with me?" There was a pause, a moment of uncertainty hanging in the air. But then one by one, her team members nodded, their faces filled with determination. Naomi felt a surge of confidence. This was it. This was the moment she had been working toward. They were going to take the risk. Naomi made the call, and they moved forward with the new opportunity. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of action. Meetings, presentations, negotiations. But through it all, Naomi kept her focus. She had come too far to turn back now. The project reached its peak, and the results were nothing short of extraordinary. The risks they had taken paid off, and the company began to see the benefits of their hard work. The success was not just about the numbers. It was about the team they had built, the trust they had earned, and the way Naomi had led them through the uncertainty. When the project was finally completed, Naomi stood in front of her team, feeling a sense of pride wash over her. They had done it. They had taken the leap, and it had paid off. Richard walked up to her, a smile on his face. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Naomi smiled back, feeling the weight of the past months finally lift off her shoulders. "We did it," she corrected him, her voice filled with pride. Richard nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You've proven something important, Naomi. You've proven that you belong here, that you're capable of leading with vision and integrity." Naomi felt a lump form in her throat. She had worked so hard to get here, and now, standing in front of Richard, she realized that she had truly made it. She wasn't just the waitress anymore. She was a leader, a woman who had stepped into a world that had never made room for her. And now, that world was hers to shape. As Naomi walked out of the office that day, she felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. She had proven to herself, to Richard, and to everyone who had ever doubted her, that she was more than capable of handling the challenges ahead. The road had been long, but she had finally arrived. And as she stepped into the future, Naomi knew that this was just the beginning. She had taken control of her destiny, and now, she was ready for whatever came next. The months that followed were a whirlwind of success and growth for Naomi. The project she had led was now considered a case study in how taking risks and embracing innovation could change the trajectory of a company. Naomi had proven herself not just to Richard, but to herself. She had come a long way from the woman who once served food in a restaurant, invisible to the powerful people who dined there. Now, she was a key player in a billion-dollar company, leading projects, making decisions, and earning respect from people she once thought were out of her league. As she stood at the window of her office, looking out over the city, Naomi couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The skyline seemed endless, filled with possibilities she had never even dreamed of when she first stepped into Richard's world. She had faced countless obstacles, each one seemingly more insurmountable than the last. But every challenge had only made her stronger, more determined. She was no longer afraid of being underestimated. She had been underestimated her whole life. But now, she had earned her place at the table. One day, as she sat at her desk, Richard walked in with a smile on his face. "Naomi," he said, his tone light, but with an edge of pride. "I have a new challenge for you." Naomi looked up from her work, intrigued. "What's the challenge?" she asked. Richard leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "I've been thinking. You've proven that you're capable of leading at this level. But there's more out there for you. I want you to head up a new division. A division focused on expansion, opening new offices, new markets, and taking this company global." Naomi's heart raced. This was it. The opportunity she had been waiting for. It wasn't just about keeping the company afloat anymore. It was about taking it to places they had never imagined. But with the opportunity came more responsibility. She wasn't just leading a team anymore. She was shaping the future of the entire company. "I don't know if I'm ready for something that big," Naomi admitted, her voice filled with both excitement and trepidation. Richard smiled. "I believe you are. I wouldn't offer this to you if I didn't think you had what it takes." Naomi took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle in. This was a huge step. But in that moment, she knew she couldn't back down. She had made it this far because she had taken risks, because she had stepped up when it mattered. Now was no different. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "I'll do it." Richard's smile widened. "I knew you would. You're not just a leader, Naomi. You're a visionary. And this company needs visionaries." Naomi walked out of the office that day feeling a rush of emotions. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges she couldn't even predict. But she was no longer afraid of the unknown. She had learned to trust herself, to trust her instincts, and to believe in her ability to shape her own future. In the months that followed, Naomi worked tirelessly, building the new division from the ground up. She traveled to new cities, met with potential partners, and strategized the future of the company with a new sense of purpose. There were moments when it felt like everything was on the line, when the weight of the decisions felt unbearable. But Naomi kept pushing forward. She wasn't going to let fear or doubt hold her back. As the division grew and expanded into new markets, Naomi felt a sense of pride like she had never known before. She had done it. She had turned a dream into reality. And in doing so, she had proven to herself and to the world that she was more than just a waitress who stood up for a billionaire. She was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had built her own future. As Naomi stood in front of the team she had built, watching as they celebrated their success, she knew that this was just the beginning. The road had been long, and the challenges had been many, but she had come out on top. She had taken control of her own destiny, and now, she was ready for whatever came next. This was her story, a story of resilience, of taking risks, of rising above the odds. And the world was just beginning to see what she was truly capable of. Discover the inspiring journey of Naomi, a woman who defied the odds to rise from being an overlooked waitress to a powerful leader in a billion-dollar company. This story is a testament to the resilience and strength of individuals who have been underestimated and overlooked in their lives. As Naomi faces new challenges, her journey serves as a powerful reminder that the path to success is often paved with obstacles, but with determination and courage, it is possible to break free from the limitations others place on us. This is one of the many Black stories that highlight the transformative power of taking risks, believing in oneself, and stepping into leadership roles. Naomi's story is a prime example of how courage in the face of adversity can lead to unexpected opportunities and monumental change. She proves that no matter where you start, you have the ability to rewrite your own narrative. In this powerful Black story, Naomi not only finds success in the corporate world, but also learns the true meaning of leadership and self-worth. These Black stories are not just about overcoming challenges. They are about the strength to change the world around us. Follow Naomi's journey and see how, through persistence and the support of those who believe in her, she transforms her life and the lives of others. These Black stories remind us all that our destiny is ours to shape, no matter the starting point.